It's 4 p.m. on Thursday, August 7th here in Korea. You're watching ARIRANG News. I'm Na Hyun-kyung. Now, today we begin with the latest on the military bullying scandal that has and still is sending shockwaves throughout the nation. The head of Korea's Military Human Rights Center held a press briefing earlier today. He said a 23-year-old conscript who was recently revealed to have died in April was clinically dead by the time he was transported to a nearby hospital. The center chief also confirmed that the Army private was killed as the result of a severe beating and added that his attackers should be charged with murder. He also said that he had some new findings. Take a look.
We found that when the victim was sent to the hospital, one of his attackers said, "If we are asked about the bruises on his chest, let's say he got them while receiving CPR. This is a serious situation."
The 23-year-old, identified only by his family name Yoon, was frequently bullied by his comrades. Yoon was reportedly forced to hold a horse riding stance until the early hours of the morning and also told to lick spit off the ground. This is just another in a series of bullying incidents in recent months. An Army sergeant who was allegedly bullied by his comrades went on a shooting rampage back in June, killing 5. President Park Geun-hye continues with her agenda of realizing a peaceful reunification of the Korean peninsula. The Presidential Reunification Committee on this Thursday held its very first meeting since being formed last month. Our Choi Yongnam reports.
The Park Geun-hye administration has placed a priority on economic reform in recent weeks, but has also shifted its focus back toward a unification drive with North Korea, an initiative that was overshadowed by April's ferry tragedy and the escalation of provocations out of North Korea. President Park on Thursday ordered members of a newly established 50-member special committee to draw up measures for building up infrastructure in North Korea and improving the lives of the North Korean people as a first step. President Park noted that next year marks 70 years since the peninsula was divided and said the task of preparing for unification could not be delayed any longer. The committee plans to conduct joint government and civilian research for unification and arouse greater public interest in the matter. President Park has said that a reunification of the two Koreas will be an economic bonanza for the peninsula and neighboring countries. During a speech in Dresden, Germany in March, she called for bolstering cross-border exchanges as a first step toward building trust between the rival Koreas and laying the groundwork for unification. The two Koreas have been divided for more than 6 decades following the 1950 to 1953 Korean War, which ended in a ceasefire, not a peace treaty. Choi Yongnam, ARIRANG News.
But North Korea seems to be expanding its nuclear program at its Yongbyon nuclear site and very actively too. The U.S.-based Institute for Science and International Security said Wednesday that satellite imagery from April and June shows there was an increase in activity surrounding a building known to store centrifuges which are used to enrich uranium. This data suggests Pyongyang might be building more centrifuges inside the building to produce weapons-grade plutonium and enriched uranium for its nuclear weapons program. The institute did add, though, that it wasn't sure whether the construction of the centrifuges had been completed. Talks about extending the transfer of Washington's wartime operational control over the South Korean military have been ongoing for months now, but Seoul and Washington may finally be nearing a conclusion to delay the transfer another 5 years to the year 2020. Here's our Yurian with this next report.
Talks on transferring the wartime operational control of South Korean forces from Washington to Seoul are underway, and it looks like the transfer will be delayed by 5 years to 2020. Delegations led by Korea's Deputy Defense Minister Ryu Jae-seung and U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, David Helvey, are currently in Washington to discuss the appropriate timing. Sources there say they agree South Korea's military needs more time to bolster its defense and other capabilities to counter threats posed by North Korea. This meeting is crucial as it could be the last round of talks before the two allies announce their agreement at their annual defense ministerial meeting in Washington in October. The U.S. took control of South Korean forces during the Korean War back in the early 1950s. Peacetime control was returned in 1994, and the South Korean military is set to achieve full autonomy next year if it takes over wartime operational control as previously scheduled. But following Pyongyang's third nuclear test in February last year, Seoul had asked Washington to delay the transfer. South Korea's defense minister Han Min-gu has also been pointing to the changing circumstances behind Seoul's request, emphasizing that North Korea has been carrying out realistic drills since Kim Jong-un took power in 2012. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
Following last week's meeting, the White House is said to be planning a second round of talks with the Korean victims of Japan's wartime sexual slavery. Sources close to the meeting said Paulette Aniskoff, director of the Office of Public Engagement at the White House, expressed her intention to invite two of the victims, Lee Ok-sun and Kang Il-chul, back to the executive office sometime next month. Aniskoff is known to have shown strong sympathy to the women while listening to their harrowing wartime experiences. The sources say the follow-up meeting, if confirmed, is expected to involve not only U.S. officials from civil social affairs, but also those handling foreign and security policies. The White House's National Security Council, however, says it's not aware of any future meetings. And moving on to the latest on the Ebola outbreak, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has issued its highest level alert for the crisis in West Africa. That means more staff and resources will be diverted toward containing its spread. It's the first time since a flu pandemic in 2009 that the agency has raised its alert to its highest level. The Ebola virus is now feared to have spread to the Middle East, with the death of a 40-year-old Saudi man under observation for an Ebola infection. New figures released by the WHO show in the period between Saturday and Monday, there were 108 new cases of Ebola and 45 additional deaths in Guinea, Liberia, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone, pushing the death toll up to 932. And next, on to the conflict in Gaza. The 72-hour ceasefire is holding for a second day, while officials from Israel and Palestine are engaged in indirect talks to reach a longer-term truce. Many people around the globe have been shocked by scenes of Palestinian civilians, including children, being killed or injured amid this month-long conflict. Mass demonstrations have been held in many parts of the world, and that includes Sewol. Our Shin Se-min reports.
These are new chants that ring through central Seoul recently.
Pro-Palestinian activists are voicing their anger at what they believe is an unreasonable force being used by Israel in Gaza.
Organized by members of a Palestinian solidarity group and a non-profit organization called Nanum Munhwa, the activists plan another street protest on Friday to mark 1 month of the outbreak of violence in Gaza that has killed more than 1,800 people, most of them Palestinian. David Levy, the deputy chief of mission at the Israeli embassy in Seoul, expressed regret over the loss of innocent lives on both the Israel and Palestinian sides, but said the war isn't against the Palestinians, but rather against Hamas.
No country can accept missile fire aimed at civilians, and Israel has the right to defend itself and protect its citizens. And we are doing whatever we can when targeting Hamas to prevent any damage to non-involved civilians in Gaza.
Despite international efforts to bring about a peaceful resolution to the crisis, protesters in Seoul aren't optimistic.
We are not expecting anything from the world, really. The world is just the politicians are wasting time and others are selling guns. They are taking a chance for business.
The outrage was also directed at the South Korean government for selling arms to Israel. Amnesty International says arms trading between the two over the last 5 years has amounted to more than $20 million. The Korean government has yet to make an official statement on the matter. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Russia is closing its food market to countries that imposed sanctions on Moscow amid continuing global sparring over Ukraine. Experts say it could have substantial impact on European farmers, in particular, as Russia is their biggest buyer of fruits and vegetables. Kwon So-ah has the details.
Responding to the tougher economic sanctions recently imposed on Russia by the EU and the US, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered a one-year ban of agricultural produce, food and vegetable imports on nations that have imposed sanctions against Russia. The government has been ordered to come up with a specific list of goods. Russia's move will have a big impact on Western exporters as Russia imports nearly a third of its fruit products from the EU, and the US is its second biggest poultry importer. In an attempt to lessen the impact on domestic consumers, Russian authorities say they are looking for alternative partners. Talks with Argentina, Ecuador, and Brazil are already scheduled for this week. Earlier, Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev reportedly said Moscow was considering banning European airlines from flying to Asia over Siberia. The sanctions against Russia began with Russia's annexation of Crimea in March, but were strengthened last week, now targeting Russia's defense, financial, and oil sectors. This came in response to Russia's continuous support for pro-Moscow separatists in Ukraine.
We don't know yet whether sanctions are working. Sanctions are working as intended in putting enormous pressure and strain on the Russian economy. If you look at projections for Russian growth, what you're seeing is that the economy has ground to a halt.
Meanwhile, there are concerns Russia could be planning an invasion, as Moscow is believed to have massed some 20,000 combat-ready troops at its border with Ukraine. NATO says Moscow could go in on the pretext of a humanitarian or peacekeeping mission as Kiev gains ground on separatist-held territory. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Bringing you the fresh updates from stories breaking in Korea and abroad. We give you a bigger and better picture of the world. Join Na Hyun-kyung live from Seoul. Every weekday, only on ARIRANG.
Now, there are multiple factors that caused April's ferry accident to turn into a national disaster. Chief among them was corruption, and as a result, more than 40 officials will soon get their day in court on charges of overlooking safety concerns in exchange for money and other personal interests. Connie Kim has the details.
43 officials linked to corrupt activities surrounding the operations of the sunken Sewol ferry have been indicted. Corruption in the marine transport industry has been identified as one of the main causes of the sinking that left more than 300 people dead or missing in April. A special investigation team at the Incheon District Prosecutor's Office says it has indicted officials from the Korea Shipping Association, the Oceans Ministry, the now-defunct Coast Guard, and the Korea Ship Safety Technology Authority. 18 have been arrested and 25 have been charged without detention. Charges against those arrested included the embezzlement of public funds for personal use, giving permission for the ship to operate without regular safety checks, and overlooking illegal acts. An official from the Korea Shipping Association also allegedly ordered those under him to permit the ferry operator to allow more passengers on board than were legally allowed. Other charges among officials who were not arrested included faking a shipping accident for insurance purposes. The prosecution is also calling for the establishment of institutions separate from Korea Shipping Association. It says the agency shouldn't have sole authority over shipping operation. After prosecutors wrap up their investigation into the cause of the sinking and corrupt management within the Korea Shipping Association, it will continue its probe into whether the Korea Shipowners Association lobbied politicians regarding the ferry disaster. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
And moving on to some tech news, we are now living in the era of wearable technology. Shipments of wearable devices are expected to top 19 million this year. And while they provoke curiosity and add an extra convenience to our lives, they also come with privacy issues. Our Kim Min-ji tells us more.
The explosive growth of wearable devices has also brought with it privacy concerns. According to a new report by Korea's National Information Society Agency, there are mounting fears of misuse or abuse of information, as wearable devices are able to collect a variety of personal information regardless of place or time. Front and center is Google Glass, which can record everything in view and share it in an instant. The product's facial recognition app named Tag is also raising alarms, as a user can get their hands on personal information, including a person's name and their photos on social media, just by taking a photo of them. A U.S. senator has already called on Google to come up with measures so that the application only identifies people who have given the permission to do so. Other countries are also stepping up efforts to protect personal information. The British Data Protection Act prohibits the use of personal information attained through wearable devices for advertisement or business purposes. Australia also offers detailed guidelines when it comes to privacy invasion through the use of digital devices. Korea, on the other hand, has a lot of ground to make up. Wearable devices do not fall into the category of network cameras or image information processing devices, so relevant laws do not forbid their use. And to be punished by the current information network law, videos must contain pornography or violate privacy or portrait rights. The Korean agency's report points that there needs to be basic standards that can be applied to wearable devices. The Korea Communications Commission acknowledges there is a cause for concern and plans to review relevant laws and regulations. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And to some health news, a new study out of the UK says that an aspirin a day could keep cancer away. Researchers at the Queen Mary University of London says taking aspirin every day can reduce the risk of developing or dying from bowel or stomach cancer by about 30 to 40%. The results are from 200 studies looking at the pros and cons of taking aspirin. The scientists say the benefits of aspirin will only show after people between the ages of 50 to 65 take a daily dose of 75 to 100 milligrams for at least 5 to 10 years. Researchers, however, warn that taking aspirin long-term can increase the risk of negative side effects like bleeding in the stomach. Now, whether it be on the canvas or on the stage, some people were just meant to be artists and display their talents in a number of fields. Our Im Yoon-hee had a chance to meet one of those artists. Let's find out who.
He's a legendary singer, an iconic face in the industry. But he also is a well-showcased artist, with plenty of works to share. From the old to the very young, most everyone on the peninsula knows Choi Yongnam and his eccentric character. He has fans as both a legendary singer, but also as an established artist. And with so many people around him, the phrase left out doesn't really come to mind. But Choi Yongnam feels otherwise.
The reason I called it left out is because contemporary art is considered left out or outcast. The general public doesn't really like contemporary art. Even to me, it can be so confusing. If someone wants to do contemporary art, the person could be an outcast or they can outcast others. Since I'm a singer and an artist, I sometimes feel left out as well. So I use that idea for this exhibition.
His creations are inspired by objects of art, and they reflect the various influences throughout his life. Everything from collaborations with foreign artists to a different kind of floral bouquet. Choi Yongnam shows his creativity isn't limited. But throughout his works, one thing is consistent, and that's his trademark hwatu, one of Korea's favorite playing cards. It's a flurry of nostalgic images, along with other flashbacks in not only his life, but in Korea's history as well. And within his works is a sense of the playful humor he finds in situations, like this newly dating couple, set against the backdrop of a traditional Korean board game of paduk. But Cho shows another side to his art, a more serious aspect, in a collection that comes with a sense of patriotism, along with a heavy message, hoping for the union of a torn country.
In my opinion, the red and blue colours are a bit tacky and childish, so I pulled all the colours out, and now it's very elegant looking. Why the rip? It reflects our torn country's history and the separated state of Korea.
Choi Yongnam is not new to the world of art exhibitions. But he does differentiate himself, once again, with an art and talk show, where he interacts with the audience on a very personal level. It's hard to be humble when you're so capable of such different mediums in art. And Choi Yongnam is well aware of his brilliance, as well as the legacy he leaves behind.
You should call me. You are the father of the Korean contemporary art.
Korean contemporary art.
Yes, you should say.
Im Yoon-hee, ARIRANG News.
Now, yesterday, the government announced plans to revise tax laws on the nation's corporations. It was met with some criticism that those measures will only be beneficiary to the conglomerates only, and Korea's finance minister was quick to respond. Here's our Kim Ji-yeon with the details.
Finance Minister Choi Yongnam defended the tax revision on conglomerates. He dismissed criticism that the changes were to benefit only the heads of the country's biggest companies. In two separate interviews with Seoul-based broadcast networks MBC and SBS, Choi said the proposal is intended to encourage conglomerates to use their cash reserves in ways that would benefit the economy. When asked how confident he was about the economic impact, Choi said the message was clear that the plan is to boost domestic demand and thus create a virtuous cycle, one in which capital flows into households as a result of conglomerates making investments, paying out dividends, and raising the wages of their employees. Choi added that the Korean economy is going through hard times and that it's necessary to do structural changes to get the economy back on track. With wholesale and retail sales contracting as a result of the Sewol ferry disaster in April, the finance minister emphasized the need to restore consumer confidence. He says the revisions provide tax cuts to those paying in debit cards and in cash and extend exemptions of income taxes on credit card users. The country's gross domestic product increased a mere 0.6% in the second quarter of the year, its lowest level in 3 quarters. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Korea's auto industry fared well last month with production, exports, and domestic sales all going up. According to trade figures, the output of vehicles stood at nearly 410,000 in July, up 22% from a year earlier. The spike was attributed to more working days in July this year and holiday season falling in August. Outbound shipments jumped 16%, while domestic sales rose 4%. Exports of auto parts also hit a monthly high in July at nearly $2.5 billion. Korea's taxation system isn't helping to bridge the gap between the haves and not-haves. That's according to data compiled by the OECD in 2012 and the National Assembly Budget Office here in Korea. It shows that Korea's poverty rate before taxation stood at 0.17% and dropped to just 0.15% after taxation. That's lower than the OECD average of 0.1%. Benefits such as tax cuts being provided to high-income Koreans' households was pinpointed as a likely reason for the minimal impact.
Good
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather updates. Currently, most of the rain has stopped here in Sewol and in the Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces. However, heavy rain is coming down in both Chungcheong-do provinces right now and in the southern regions. Now, less than 5 millimeters of rain is forecast to fall in Sewol today and until tomorrow, but between 20 to 60 millimeters is expected in Gangwon-do and Gyeongsang-buk-do province, while up to 40 millimeters could fall in both Chungcheong-do provinces. Now, today is Ipchu here in Korea, which is the first day of fall according to the traditional solar calendar. And nationwide rain has brought down the temperatures by about 4 degrees on average. Now, as for Typhoon Halong, it's currently moving northwards from the southeastern coastal region of Okinawa, Japan. But the typhoon has turned more to the east, which means it won't have a great an effect on us here in Korea. Now, going over to our temperature readings. Seoul will top out the afternoon at 29. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will top out at 30 and 29 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops to 30, Dokdo peaks to 24, while Nangkang tops to 18. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you.
All right, thank you, Michelle. That's all I have for now. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with more at 6 p.m. Korea time.